Do you want to hear about the terrology of the Biden crime family? Well, I'm going to play around with that today. So stay tuned and look at the archetypes, the cards, and the glyphs of astrology. And let's just play around with some fun ideas about our crazy world. Have you wondered why some people can just get away with murder? Literally, and certainly with high crimes and more than misdemeanors. So how do they do that? Well, in astrology and in karma, we have things that we can't help. Now, there's a big question always. Always. What's the big question? The big question is it fate or free will? And of course, I have to tell you, it's neither or both. More likely, it's both. Why? Because free will is yang and fate is yin. Fate is karma. Fate is what we're doing now. It's our physical experience. We're in our fate. You're always in your fate. You're always doing your fate, and your fate's always doing you because it's who you are. Now, your free will is when you kind of you get get a little handle on who you are and what your fate is. And then it gives you a little bit of wiggle room so you can do what you need to do. Now, some people are just lucky. So we're going to talk about the eighth house and the 12th house because the eighth house is other people's money. And the richest, wealthiest people have a lot of energy there. The also richest, wealthiest people have a lot of energy in the fourth house, the moon's house. So the eighth house is Pluto's house, and the fourth house is the moon's house, and the 12th house is Jupiter's house. Jupiter at night, not the daytime king, but the ocean lady. Jupiter in his lady garb, or Modernian speaking, modernity, what is this? Modernly speaking, Neptune. Okay, so what we're looking at are archetypal characters. Now, when you are living your life, you're not thinking every day about your archetypal characters. You're just being you. But what happens when you study this stuff a little bit, it gives you a clue into what's you. Because when we are born, we are integrated into a cult. It's called our family. It's called our town. It's called our nation. It's called, this kind of. So all these levels up and down of culting. So it's where you believe that you're it. You are the shit and you are it. Now, the trouble with this culting is when we think we are the best and only. Of course, I have a theory on that. I think that we think we're the best and only because modern religion has us with one God. Monotheism, it makes you think, what happens? Here we go. We all know about role models. We hear about role models all the time. Everybody needs their daddy role model and they need, a good mother, blah, blah, blah. We need role models. We have role models. So what happens when your only divine role model is one dude? I'm a simple girl. I'm just a simple girl. So the one dude mentality has permeated all of Modernia. So every little group thinks we are the chosen of this one dude, and we're special, and we can beat you up because you're not. That's what you get with the fallacy of oneness. And oneness, I think, is a disease. I think it's a terrible idea, which is why I prefer my studies in esotericism. Why? Because over my life, I have learned that my suffering and my mistakes and my dummy stuff is part of a lesson, but this isn't like a school lesson thing. No, this is a part of self-understanding. I just thought of something in my head. Self-understandment. Do you like it? I love making up words, and I do it because it annoys people, and I like being annoying at times. All right, so the point is, understanding all of your foibles is helpful. It's helpful in getting control over your nonsense and knowing which part of you is nonsensical and which part is valuable. It's all valuable, really. All right, so what we're going to talk about today is the Biden crime family. Now, this is an interesting family. And politically speaking, it's a really good time to get into this because the world has gone completely, well, not completely. We can't go completely yin and yang because then we would disappear. But we're in a narrow channel of like just a narrow channel. And so what you want to do is you want to stay right in the middle of that channel. There you go. Right? And you don't want to go too far because you get bumped really hard. If you bump the edges of the, okay, so let's do another analogy. I'm thinking of two big walls, okay, a narrow alley. So you're in the city and there's this two buildings and the alleyway's narrow. It's like being in Italy. And those tall tufa stone buildings, and then the people are all, you can't even fit a car. When we went there when I was young, all the big American cars, they wouldn't fit in those little narrow alleyways, the streets of Italy and the southern town that I lived in. Point is, if you stay right in the middle between the two walls, then you pass through. But say you start spinning and dancing and twirling and putting your elbows out, you're going to hurt your elbow. You're going to hit the wall on either side. Or you start leaning on one side and then you slip down and I don't know. You can make this into a cartoon, right? And that's what we're doing. We're spinning out and hitting the two sides of the buildings. And we're supposed to be, it's not supposed, it's just easier if you sort of settle down in the middle and just proceed down the center without bumping your elbows into the edges so hard. You can lean gently. Let's lean gently on the yin side and the yang side of our little torture chamber, right? Why do we have to just blast ourselves on both edges? But this is what we do. We test the edges to find out what is there. But as they say, do not look too long into the abyss, lest it looks back into you. Now, this is where we're talking about boundaries. Now, how are we going to define our boundaries? Well, that's what we're doing. And I think, in my generation, I'm an old lady. When I was young, and I was actually a young adult in the 70s, I was born in 1950. Now, what does that tell you? That tells you that I've been through a lot of generations and seen a lot of testing and done a lot of testing myself. And let me tell you, a lot of the shit I did is just horrible, stupid, dumb, and wrong. So take it from an old woman. We are testing our limits. And one of the best things you can do when you get too close to the edge is just back away. Just give up, surrender. Now, this is a lesson for the 12th house people. Surrender is the key for people with the 12th house issue. And these are addicts, prisoners, people who have gone too far over the edge and who have taken too much liberty and been victimized in some way. And how does one victimize oneself? Well, see, that's part of the story. Because we make ourselves into being victims. We do this to ourselves. Now, one of the things, blame the victim, don't blame the victim. Let's not scream that because it doesn't help. It doesn't help. What we need to do, what we're doing here, is to understand the complex of why you were victimized in a situation. Why did this happen to me? And what did I learn from this? And how can I live with it? And how can I repair it? Right? And so the addicts do the 12-step program. And what's the 12th step? Well, that's where you get liberation. That's where you get it. You realize that you've done bad stuff, other people have done bad stuff to you, and you're part of a system. So what's your part in it? And that's not about making yourself bad and wrong. And see, that to me is the most important part, is figuring out, well, how on earth does this help me and you and anybody in society? What's the good in it? What's the purpose of it? Well, for me, you see, the purpose is that I finally know how to let the world go by. Because all of my tampering and interfering didn't help, and it didn't make things right because I was incompetent. I was trying to fly and I didn't have wings. Someone else was much better equipped to do the things that I was trying. I shouldn't have been doing that. It wasn't my business. All right, so what I do is I look back and I go, well, what is my business? How do I know what I'm supposed to be doing? Well, I look at my little esoteric stories and I understand better. My job is to tell the stories of understanding and revelation. So I do it for myself, I do it for my clients, I do it for my friends, and I'm doing it for you because these stories of revelation are important. They open our eyes to a bigger picture, and we need that bigger picture more than ever now. Okay, so here's Hunter Biden's chart. I have given him a Gemini rising. I changed his birth time on the internet time frame by 6 minutes in order to push it back into Gemini, because I looked at that face and I said, that's a Gemini rising, not a Cancer rising person. There is a demonic, dark-eyed, suspicious, shifty-eyed look in his face that I just cannot ascribe to a Cancer rising. No way. And then I said, well, because this is how I do it, my work. I said, well, what on earth is a Gemini rising? I'm a Gemini rising too, shifty eyes. Point being, the boss of that Gemini rising is then Mercury, right? So Mercury, when Mercury's in the house of death, you get a shifty-eyed character, right? So here we go. Do some terminology. There we go. So we've got Mercury is the ruler of this man, and he has his Mercury is in the house of death. Okay. Now the death card represents transformation in very I could say hideous ways, painful ways, traumatic ways. It is trauma. Eighth house is trauma, and it's other people's money as well. And so what you get in this house is depth. You get depth and importance. You get power. This is the house of atomic explosion. This is where you get, you make a deal with somebody, and you made a deal with somebody, and now you're living it out. The eighth house is the act of sex. It is the moment of intrusion. It is the pounding. It is the entering and the being inside of each other. It's really intense because you can't pull out of it. You can't separate yourself. You are stuck in that death house. You will be born. You will pay taxes and you will die. That's the eighth house. Woo! Yay, Scorpio. Scary stuff, right? Well, Scorpios live with it every day. What it means is that they're deep and serious people who want to get their way. And some of them are going to do it in subtle bad ways that are hard on others, and some of them are going to do it in equitable ways that are mutually of benefit. Now, depending on how the family is, that's going to explain, whether they're going to enrich their family or not. Now, what we have here, Hunter's got his, let me get a pencil. I like circles. All right, so here we go. Mercury is conjunct the moon, and it's in the eighth house. So what does that tell me? That tells me that he has a deep connection with his parents with his family, you know. And so you look at the family house, which is number 4, and you go, oh, what's in the number 4 house? Well, Pluto and the South Node and the IC. All right. All of these characters define what his DNA, what his inheritance, his genetic inheritance. So what is it that you come out of? What's that hole in the earth, that town you were born in, and what do those people eat, and what kind of molecules exist in Wilmington, Delaware? Well, whatever is the essence of Wilmington, Delaware is also the essence of the people born there, you see. And so but then you take it another level, personal. You put it into that house where that family lives, and then you have the high priestess, and that's the moon. Okay. And so this moon card then is in Virgo, because that puts that in the 4th house. So what I'm seeing then is that we've got, yeah, here we go. Virgo is the hermit. So these people, his people, Hunter's people, come from Virgo people. And this is about Virgo. See, Virgo's thing is going to make it better. I'm going to fix this. I'm going to improve on it. But Virgo gets a bad rap when they try to fix others from the stuff they're feeling within. In other words, this is the card that represents, if you don't get this about yourself and get it fixed, fix your own shirt, mend your own underwear. Don't go around telling other people to mend their underwear. You mend their underwear for them, and you fix your own underwear. Virgo is all about doing it yourself. It's a do-it-yourself for sure. Now, and it can be very resilient that way. I mean, when a Virgo gets it that, wait a minute, I am criticizing somebody for something I do and I can't fix within myself, so I'm trying to fix it outside of myself. That's not a happy Virgo. That is not a happy camper. However, when you get it that you're supposed to fix it within yourself, then that's a good thing. Now, here's the issue with that, because when you put, let's see, here we go. When you put Pluto, and here's your Pluto, when you put Pluto in Virgo in that house, you get looking for redemption, right? And this is something that is really hard to do. Okay. And this is very Plutonic, and this is very 8th house as well. So there is a bounce back between there we go, between the 8th and the 4th with this Plutonic thing, you see? So in other words, this 8th house energy is repeated in the 4th house of the mother and the father, the parental house. So in other words, it's like the Biden crime family. He's coming from the Biden crime family. And so here's my theory, is that he's a buffoon, that he's a total buffoon. And he's just an addict and a junkie. And he is absolutely idiotic because he hasn't dealt with his issues. Obviously, we know all the stories of him having sex with his dead brother's wife and diddling his niece. I mean, these things are, I don't know it for sure, but I've seen the people talk, they show you. Oh God, I can't prove it. I don't know. But his reputation is on video. Let's just say that. We've seen him smoking his crack pipe and driving really fast and videoing himself. He is a buffoon and an idiot. Now, what is going on with that? Well, here we go. Saturn in the 12th. Saturn is where you form your personality, you form your values, you form your wants. Saturn is the formation maker. So when you put Saturn in the 12th house of dreams, it can either mean I'm going to make my dreams come true, or it can be I think my dreams are real, but I'm just an idiot. I mean, it's like, Saturn in the 12th is tricky. It's very tricky. So the point is, when we have a 12th house story, we have to go back to that thing of surrender and say, oh, I'm an idiot. You have to do that. You have to get on your knee. You have to bend the knee to your own folly. That's the 12th house success. And when people with the 12th house don't admit the mea culpa, that's like, what is that? Mea culpa, mea culpa. It's my fault. I did that. It's my doing, and I'm sorry. That's a mea culpa. You have to mean it. And so if you don't, and that's what they do in the 12 steps for all the addicts, right? But the addicts who don't go there, who don't say, oh, oops, I am so sorry. That was a terrible thing. And I will do my best to not repeat it. And I will make up for it. You know, what I did was I took all the mistakes I made with my family. I was trying to help and I was a buffoon and I messed it up a lot. And so when I got the ability to help the family, I gave them half of my income for 3 years because I needed to make that up to them. And now I don't have that anymore. I'm not doing that. But the point is, you have to make it up in some way, you see. And when you do that, that's when you get to surrender. And that's when the surrender then elevates you. Now, the people who are still in their filthy, nasty habits and they've got their blinders on and they're not admitting their wrongs. Got to admit your wrongdoings. They are not good people to have around in charge of your life. He has a 12th house stellium. Now, what does that mean to us? Interested parties, 12th house stellium, lots of planets there in the 12th house. Now, the person's sun is their soul and their desire. I mean, the sun is your light spot of your personality, and it is an important thing in your chart. Now, everybody born in a month has the same sun sign, right? So how does that matter? Well, we personalize it by saying, what sign is it in? Well, we know what sign it's in, but we personalize it by saying, well, who is associated with it? In other words, what costume is that character wearing? And of course, the sun is that heroic part of us. It is the heart. It is the Christ center with the little flame in the hand. Christ holding that. Yeah, it's got the little flame in the heart. It is the center of love. It is the grand central station of love. The sun is very important in your chart, and it represents your living willingness to be. In the middle, right? All right, clumsy me. Now, when the sun's in Scorpio, it's kind of like a dark sun because Scorpio is a darker, more subdued energy than the bright summer season, because Scorpio season is when the leaves are falling. And so what do you get? Thank you for watching today. And remember to subscribe and like and comment. The sun goes down. That will help me algorithmically, and I know you only get a little glimpse of the sun. Of service and help to me. Scorpio season is like, well, all the winter planets really are like living in a valley. I lived in Colorado in the 70s, and I lived on Canyon Avenue. It was not an avenue, it was a little road. And it had mountains, big mountains on both sides. The sun would come up around 11, and we would all stand out in the yards. And it would go away at 2. We were in darkness most of the day for months because you just get this little window of light. Now, all of the winter planet. All the winter season does that for people's sun. So people born in the winter, they have a more introverted look at things, you see. But then there are um, other factions in your astrology chart. But anyway, so when somebody has their 12th house loaded like this and their sun in the 12th house, this is a dream time chart. This is a person who, I mean, anybody with this, not just this man, but anybody with a strong stellium in the 12th house is going to have some deep inner issues that they will be almost living in a dream. Here's somebody you can relate to, Madonna. She's got a bunch of planets in Leo in the 12th house. So what does that do? Well, Leo is the bright sun. And so how does she express her bright sun stuff in the more introspective 12th house? Well, she became this amazing performer, but what did she perform? She performed her internal dream stuff, and it was potent. Impotent. It was really big. She is a consummate performer. Whether you like her or not doesn't matter. She is dramatic and she's big. And she brought that Leo heart through the dreams and presented it to the public. And people loved it. Not so much anymore, because what happens with an aging diva, and this is AARP's fault, AARP. Every single month I get a magazine from them with some old person, all like hairbrushed and the hair dyed and talking about how sexy they are. It's like, will you stop? When you're old, you're not so sexy, okay? Get over yourself. It ain't natural. Anyway, that's just me. All right, so the 12th house then is the dream house, and it is where I'm a 12th houser. I'm confessing. I always confess that. What happens with the 12th house? Here's a story about the 12th house. And this is why I have sympathy for Joe Biden. And I'm still talking about the crime family, but it's different. So let's talk about the 12th house for a minute. When I was how old was I? Were we in Italy? I can't remember. I have that thing, SDAM, where you can't remember your story, your life. I can't see the pictures. I don't know the dates. I can't remember the people. People would come to me, oh, hi, Jewel, blah, blah. Do I know you? I don't remember. So point being, I know a little bit. Now, one of the things I know is that because you know the things that were a big deal on some deep emotional level, because when you can't remember the stories of your life, what you remember are the aromas and the feelings. It's very visceral, it's very tactile. And so I remember feeling, I always felt dissociated. I always felt alone, like I didn't fit in, not that I didn't even fit in, that I was apart. Okay. And I don't know if every 12th houser feels that way, but I have a sense of it being sort of a dreamy way to live, living in a dream, literally. So I was a Girl Scout, and I wanted a banner with the little badges, and you had to do stuff. There was a list, and you had to accomplish the list to get your badge. Well, I sat down and I started reading the list, and I went, oh, for this one, you have to have danced and twirled and done 6 pirouettes and taken 7 lessons and done so many performances. And I would just say, well, I could do that. I've done that. And then I would decide that I could do it because I understood what it was like to do it. And I would check it off. I got myself a whole bunch of badges. That's what Joe Biden is doing. It's just so obvious to me because I've done it, you see. I know what this is like. So you figure, oh yeah, I know what because what's the key word for understanding? No, I said that wrong. What's the key word for the 12th house that I use all the time now? It's understanding. It's understanding. Oh gosh. So, all right, let me unshare for a minute. I have a habit of sharing for too long. It's understanding in the 12th house. That's the whole purpose of going through the 12 steps. Every time you encounter a step, you get closer to understanding the cycle. Okay? It's a circle. Everything is a circle and everything is spinning. So what happens then is you get to a point where you understand a lot. And there was a character called Walter Mitty who thought he was living his life, but he was only dreaming it. And that's Walter Mitty characters are very 12th housey. And that's what we do. I mean, I understand a lot, but you have to balance it with study and doing and being and fucking up, apologizing. You go through the cycle, yeah? And how many times you go through the cycle then helps you to understand even better. And the more I understand, the more I understand, the easier it is to let shit happen and not worry about it. I guess it's who was the guy what me worry? Alfred E. Newman. I'll put it in. I'll put it in there. Alfred E. Newman with a big smile and the goofy head. What me worry? That's a 12th houser right there. It's like, okay, been there, done that, seen it all. I love you. So what? So how do you fit that in with purpose and meaning in your life? You figure it out. Now, someone like Joe Biden, he does not realize what he's doing. And that's why it's so blatantly obvious to everybody else and not to him, because he hasn't done the work. When a 12th houser doesn't do the work, they can do evil. There was a man called, what's his name? Roy Cohen. He was the lawyer, the terrible lawyer that got the Rosenbergs killed. He was a terrible person. And he was like a multiple Pisces, which is also 12th house. It's the same characterization. It is the number 12 redemptive step in the cycle of living. And so Roy Cohen is multiple Pisces. Well, you know what they say about Pisces? Oh, we're so nice. We're so sweet. We're Jesus. We love you. It's like Pisces can be sweet and Jesus-y and loving if Pisces has come to the conclusion and the understandings that she needs to come to in order to understand the balance, the events, the place that happened, and how she fit in to it, how she massaged it, how she encouraged it. Because if you don't do that, then you can do evil and pretend, oh, well, that's not me. I was there or I wasn't there. I'll just make it up. You see, it's very deceptive because that's another keyword for the 12, deception. And who are you going to deceive? Well, someone like Joe Biden has been deceiving himself for years. Now, what does that do to his children? Well, his son, let's look. So the children are in the 5th house, and his 5th house is ruled by Aries, and he's got Mars rules Aries and Scorpio in the 12th house. His children are 12th housers. It's like they have inherited, his children inherit his deception and his delusion. But the problem is that Hunter then has a legacy of being in a crime family. Because whether Biden knows it or not, his whole crime family thing here, you see, that shows up in Hunter. So what they say is the sins of the father come down to the children. And so you see how this works. Now, the 4th house is the house of conception. We think it's the house of the moon, and it is. In the Malkut, it's at the bottom of the tree of life. It's down here. And what it represents what it represents is the conception, where the sperm contacts the egg. So it's not really the act of sex, because it takes a while for those little wigglers to get to that egg. So it's really separate from the sex act. The sex act is the eighth house. That's the union. That's the desirous union. And the product of that desirous union is then the conception in the fourth house, which is why the ancients said that the fourth house was how you know about your father. Because each house has it tells you this or that about the native's family and their, their parents, their children, their experience. Okay. So interesting, isn't that? That's very interesting to me. So Hunter now is coming from this crime family. I don't know all the history, but I have been informed to a point that this has gone on for several generations. That, but I could see that in Hunter's chart then, is that with Pluto in his fourth house and the South Node, which really does represent your past generations. So there's an intensity in meddling, because Virgo is the meddler, the fixer, fixing stuff. I'll just put a little stitch in there, and then we'll just pretend like there was never a hole there. And it's much better to say, oh yeah, there's a hole and I fixed it. You see the difference. All right, so point being, this is like, okay, this is the crime family. So we've got in the Pluto in the house of inheritance, and then the DNA inheritance, genetic inheritance. And then the Pluto house has the ruling planet, right? Because the ruling planet of Gemini is that. Now, interestingly enough, the father, okay, you see that Gemini rising, all right, and then the father has Sag rising. Now, Sag rising is, I'm not going to just say blanket Sag risings are liars. Joe Biden is a liar, but what's the difference? Well, because we all have lots of wonderful Sag people that are not liars. But what it is, it's about storytelling. And so the storyteller, now in the ancients, in the time before modernity, in the olden days, there were traveling minstrels. They would go from town to town, and they would go into a town, and people would invite them into their home, and they would entertain. The entertainers were the Jupiterian adventurous type people, and they would tell stories, and they would tell a story either with song, or they would just be a traveler who would tell the story of where he'd been and what he had learned, and he would share that with the people that were hosting him. I've heard that this is our Arab culture as well, that the Arab culture invites people into their home, and they share their food, and then the guest shares their stories. Storytelling was a way of sharing experience with each other from town to town when things were more separate. I wonder why in Modernia and with our lovely new internet, which I enjoy, we are having so much trouble telling stories without reacting in anger. It's just a story, people. All right, so Joe then has Sag rising, which says natural storyteller. Now, one of the things I learned years ago about Sagittarians is don't believe your own bullshit if you're a Sag. So in other words, you're telling a story. Remember that. It's a story. And some of it's based on an experience. But memory, it's flighty at best, even if you have a good one. So you make it up. And that is why Mr. Biden is so he is just, he's making up stories that are based on his, there we go. We're that are based on his dreams, his imagination, his dream time. His stories are pure fantasy. And now, how did he get away with that? Well, he's got his midheaven. He looks like he knows what he's doing. When you've got your midheaven with Virgo, you look like you know what you're doing. Yeah. Yeah. So there's that. So anyway, I don't know if it's a Biden crime family. It sure feels like it, though. I mean, the list of things they've done, and now with their naughty son, who has been, who I mean, he has videotaped himself driving over 100 miles an hour and bragging while smoking a crack pipe and driving, and I mean the whole thing. Pretty crazy. We've seen him do really bad things on the videos that he himself made. And evidently with his niece, I don't know. They said it was not okay to say it out loud what he had shown because you would get demonetized or you would get thrown off of YouTube if you said it out loud. So, all of these suspicions and all this gossipy, suspicious stuff is troublesome. So we have to look into these things on our own, don't we? But as an astrologer and tarologist, I will tell you right now that this family has a lot of Pluto energy. There's a lot of Plutonic stuff. And what that means is the car crashes into the abutment and the driver survives and without a scratch, and the passenger is horribly mutilated. In other words, shit, really bad shit happens, and someone has to live up to it. Someone has to take responsibility for it. And who will that be? Well, these people keep it close to the vest. They do not want you to know what they've done. They don't want to admit it to themselves because they are delusional. And if they stop their delusion, it's the number 12. If they stop their delusion, then they will have the horrifying moment of truth, of self-judgment, and that is hard. That's really, really, really hard. When you have that moment when you say, oh shit, that's my fault. I did that. That is really hard. When I look back at my life and I see how I lived my life and how it affected my two sons who are now dead, young, middle-aged young men and 50 years old. And I don't have to go into details, but I have to tell you, if I had done things differently, they would still be alive today. So people say, oh, Jewell, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. No, it was my responsibility. Now, I have reasons why I could not do better for them. I could have done better for them. There was a little voice always egging me on. But I chose the road I chose, and I know the results of those choices. And that is what you do in the 12th house. That is what you have to do. And Joe Biden hasn't done it. And his son with his Saturn in the 12th hasn't done it. But until you say, mea culpa, here's my part in this story, you're going to get it wrong. You're going to hurt the passengers in your car. And it's going to be your responsibility. Oof. And in spite of that, I'm a happy girl. Why is that? I don't know. I always say I'm a cork that floats up to the top no matter how far down you push me. I'm lucky that way. But it's good to know. It's good to know. Are you a cork or a stone? Learn some of this stuff. It's really helpful. It's very useful. I have found it incredibly useful in my 12-step journey. And I hope that my journey can help you in yours.